What is happening in room number 333? The Blackwood Orphanage was never supposed to exist. Hidden deep in the countryside, it had been abandoned for nearly 60 years, left to rot like a corpse no one wanted to bury. Locals spoke about it in whispers, warning of the screams that sometimes echoed from inside at night, even though the place had been deserted for decades. No records existed of its closure. No one knew what happened to the children who once lived there. And no one dared to step inside. No one except Daniel Carter. A documentary filmmaker obsessed with haunted places, Daniel had spent years tracking down urban legends. But Blackwood was different. The orphanage wasn't just haunted, it was cursed. Daniel wanted proof. Real, undeniable proof. That's why he came alone. No crew, no backup. Just him, his camera, and the worst mistake of his life. Daniel parked his van outside the orphanage just before sunset. The building was a rotting carcass, its windows like hollowed-out eye sockets staring back at him. As he stepped through the broken front doors, the air turned thick. The silence wasn't natural, it was watching him. The orphanage was frozen in time. Dust-covered toys littered the floor, small rusted beds sat in neat rows, their sheets still tucked in, untouched. But something felt wrong. Then he heard it, a whisper. Not loud, not close, but there. Faint, like a child hiding in the shadows. Daniel raised his camera, recording everything. A doorway at the end of the hall stood slightly open. Its brass plaque was missing, but he knew what room it was, room number 333. His heart pounded. Every instinct told him to turn back. But he pressed on, filming every step. As he reached the door, the whispering stopped. And then, the door creaked open. The room was wrong. Unlike the decayed halls outside, room 333 was untouched. A rocking chair swayed slowly in the center, even though there was no wind. The walls were covered in drawings. Crude, childish sketches of figures hanging from the ceiling, children with stitched mouths and a tall, faceless woman. Then, footsteps, tiny, bare feet padding across the floor behind him. Daniel spun around. A girl stood in the doorway. She was about 6 years old, her dress torn and dirty. Her skin was pale, her lips cracked and dry. But it was her eyes that made his stomach drop. She didn't have any, just black, empty sockets staring straight at him. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered. Daniel's breath hitched, his camera glitched, the static filled the screen. Then she smiled, and the walls started bleeding. The air thickened, turning into something warm, damp, alive. The girl's head snapped to the side, too far, bones cracking. Her mouth opened wide, wider than a human jaw should. "She's coming." Daniel stumbled backward as the walls began to pulsate, the drawings moving on their own. Then, the sound. A wet, sickening gurgle. The rocking chair stopped, and something crawled out from underneath it. A hand, but not human. Long, bony fingers stretched unnaturally, nails like cracked glass. Then another hand, and another. A woman pulled herself into view, but she was all wrong. Her body was swollen, bloated, like a pregnant corpse left to rot. Her arms were too long, her fingers too thin. Her face stitched into a wide, permanent smile. She crawled toward Daniel, her neck twisting at impossible angles. "Mother is hungry," the girl whispered, and then, the baby started screaming. Daniel turned to run, but the door was gone. The air grew hot, humid, suffocating. And the floor, it wasn't wood anymore, it was soft, squishy. He looked down. He was standing on flesh. The entire room was alive. The walls pulsed, veins bulging beneath the surface. Something inside them was moving. Then the crib split open. Inside there were no babies, only tiny, twitching hands. Severed at the wrists, fingers still grasping, trying to hold on to something that wasn't there. The bloated woman crawled closer, her stomach stretching, something writhing inside. "You will feed them." Daniel's body lifted off the ground. The girl watched, tilting her head. "She needs more children." The woman's mouth ripped open, rows of infant fingers lining her throat. Daniel screamed. And then, darkness. The next visitor. The orphanage was silent again. The rocking chair swayed, the walls were still. And in the center of the room, a new drawing appeared. A man with a camera. His mouth stitched shut, his eyes black holes. Waiting for the next visitor. Final warning. If you ever find room number 333, don't go inside. Some doors should never be opened.